Welcome to my interpersonal communication project. My name is Sandra Gonzalez Coronado and I'm a student at Liberty University Online. This brief presentation is my final project for the course HSER 508, Studies in Interpersonal Communication. But wait a minute, don't tune me out yet. What I want to share with you goes beyond a class requirement. What I want to share with you is communication skills and knowledge that will enhance and improve the quality of your life and that of your relationships. So let's begin. Next slide. In regards to my communication, the overarching goal for my life is twofold. First, I want to listen more and talk less. I want to listen to others in a non-judgmental and empathic way, so to create a safe environment where others are free to express themselves and talk freely about the matters of their heart, as they feel that they're being listened to, valued, and respected. Second, I want to create in others a desire to learn more about how we communicate with one another and encourage them, and you, the viewer, to become a better listener. Next slide. An excellent resource that we utilize in this course early in the class is the book by Mel Caronel, How to Solve the People Puzzle. There are four major types of personalities or temperaments that define who we are. First, we have the D personality, which is characterized by a dominating, demanding, determined, and decisive personality. Then you have your I's, which are inspiring, influencing, impressing, and interested in people personalities. Then you have your S, which are steady, stable, security-oriented. These are the personalities of the specialists. And then you have your C, which are characterized by a cautious, competent, calculating, and contemplative personality. My profile shows that I'm an SI as to what others expect of me, and a CIS as to what I am. We are not one trait or the other, but we're usually a blend of these traits. Therefore, the blends in my personality. I do consider myself a mature SI and CIS, as I have learned to control my need to be liked by all people. And I have gone from needing to be the center of attention to simply enjoying it when it happens and when it's appropriate, of course. I tend to be somewhat critical. Having self-awareness of this is already helping me to overcome this barrier and deal with it more effectively. As reflected by my behavioral blend, I do tend to be more critical in my personal life than in my professional life, where I have learned to be more conscientious and careful with the way I communicate with my peers and subordinates. I still need to improve in my personal life in this area, which is driven by my demands for excellence from all and in all. Self-awareness and constant practice of effective listening skills are already helping me overcome this barrier. My CIS personality also influenced my decision-making style. I'm known to be somewhat indecisive as I look at all sides of an issue, and usually I can identify and understand the perspective of others pretty well. However, when you pair this with the need to create and promote an environment of cooperation and peace, it's sometimes reflected as a lack of assertiveness or decisiveness. And as I mature, I have learned to become more assertive without coming across aggressive. Next slide. In dealing with potential barriers, I can foresee that as a bilingual and bicultural person, one difference is the styles in which I communicate in English as opposed to Spanish. English being more formal as it comes mostly from my brain, while Spanish more of the language of my heart. In his book, Why Don't We Listen Better?, Peterson states, feeling heard and understood has a lot to do with whether or not personal connection happens. We humans want to know that people care about us, value us, and take us seriously. It is in that connectedness and in that human side of the conversation that relationships are developed. In order to connect at a deeper level in my professional life, I'm going to have to be conscious about projecting empathy in my conversation. And for that to happen, I have to stop focusing on myself and what words or vocabulary I'm using in English in order to appear more competent and allowed for the connection to happen from my heart. In my field of work, time and attention to detail are of an essence. I work with child welfare. Listening at a level 1, which is the optimum listening level per Burley Allen, requires a time investment that one may not always have the luxury to give or also the luxury to ignore. Providing the talker with my full attention will, more often than not, deal with issues timely, and in time we can begin to communicate effectively. Next slide. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about noise pollution. Noise pollution can be internal or external, as it refers to barriers in our communication. Internal noise pollution are barriers that are within us and that take our attention from the talker and impedes mindful listening. External noise pollution refers to barriers in our environment that, once again, impede our listening, but they're outside of us. Next slide. In reflecting about my internal noise pollution, once again, as a bicultural person, I have learned that the importance of eye contact in conversation to the Western culture, it's always present. This is still an uncomfortable situation for me at times, especially when speaking to a person of authority. My mind wanders from thinking if the amount of eye contact I'm giving is enough or too much, and a strong feeling of inadequacy invades me at times. This train of thought takes my focus from the conversation as I debate internally on the feelings I'm experiencing and what is their meaning. Self-awareness will help me come back to the conversation and focus on what is being said rather on how I look or not as I try to make appropriate eye contact. A very difficult and distracting quality also that affects me internally is when people try to put blame on others or other factors for their shortcomings of mistake. I quickly go from I'm okay, you're okay, to a position of I'm okay, you're not okay. Now, understanding that this is probably a defensive mechanism on the part of the talker, and probably even a response to the way that I'm asking the question or expressing myself, and that I have the power as a listener to influence what happens next, I will need to trust that I can change the course of the conversation, utilizing techniques that can get us unstuck and enlarge our conversation. In regards to external noise pollution, one thing that stands out is talker characteristics as a form of external noise pollution. A strong accent, for example, might make us worry that we may not be fully understanding the person or even question if they're understanding us. Dawn Ansbury, in her article, Using Effective Listening Skills, says, studies indicate that some native listeners tend to downgrade speakers who are perceived as having a foreign accent. The attitudes and biases a listener holds towards a speaker accent can affect intelligibility. Thus, being aware of our biases and how they impact the communication process is an important step in developing effective communication skills. In my professional life, there are a lot of interruptions. I have learned that I can be respectful to talkers by giving them all my attention, setting my phone to do not disturb, closing my office door, and putting a sign that clearly states that I'm in a meeting help prevent so many unnecessary interruptions that undermine the person that is speaking to me at that moment. Providing an environment free of distraction at home or at work ensures better communication with all. When receiving visitors at home, for example, sit at a room where there's no TV or ensure that the TV or the radio are off. Even a simple gesture as letting the dog out when visitors are not comfortable with pets ensure that one can provide the full attention to the exchange and listen attentively to the talker. Next slide. To talk about my plan of action, implementation plan, and it is also twofold. First, I deal with my plan of action in regards to attitude, and then in regards to techniques that I wanted to implement. In regards to my attitude, I want to become what Rebecca Shafir in Stewart's a book calls a mindful listener. Mindful listening negates the idea that multitasking is a desirable characteristic. It might work well when dealing with computers or doing the dishes, but when dealing with another human being, we need to devote our whole beings to being present in the moment and taking it all in, not judgmentally and with empathy. I also, in regards to my attitude, I want to deal from the position of I'm okay, you're okay, as described by Burley Allen in her book. In taking an I'm okay, you're okay perspective, I can provide a safe environment where talkers can really express themselves without fear of being shut down, put down, or judged. And most importantly, I will be open myself to other perspectives. Thus, growing and learning can occur for both talker and listener. In regards to techniques that I want to use, I'm inclined, I really like the talker listener card included in Peterson's book, and it is a very, very useful tool. It's part of my plan, especially as I return to work later in the fall. I want to utilize it with peers, in meetings with families, and I want to model how to use this talker listener card and share it with peers so that they can also implement this tool in their contact with family members, other co-workers, and even in their personal life, and improve the quality of their relationships. When dealing with arguments, conflicts, disagreements, my plan is to implement what Susan Campbell's taught us in her essay in Stewart's book, the phrase of I hear you and I have a different perspective. This phrase includes what Stewart calls the and stance. In utilizing this technique, one is clearly messaging to the other that one is willing to explore other options and look at other perspectives. One has an open mind, thus inviting the talker to communicate more to us. So it's like we're taking the traditional yes, but, which negates everything we said prior to the but, and replacing it with yes and. Yes, I hear you and I want to add this other part. In regards to other techniques, I also want to implement meta-communication. Meta-communication, it's not only about the hidden messages in our conversation, but it's also about talking about the way in which we communicate. So we let others in the secret to good communication. We share techniques and develop together a plan on how we're going to approach a given subject, how we're going to handle conflict, how we're going to handle disagreement. Talk about how we're going to do this, being utilizing the talker listener card, or simply making commitment to listen mindfully to each other. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about effective praise. Nardon, Steers, and Sanchez-Runden explain that people tend to have better recall of information when it's consistent with their cultural knowledge and values. In the past, I have experienced conflict in this area as a supervisor. Coming from a collectivist culture, I tend to recall best team accomplishment rather than individual ones. Highly individualistic people need to hear praise that fulfills their cultural context and values. Keeping this in mind, I plan to listen attentively and ensure that I'm providing praise and encouragement in a way that is meaningful to all as individuals. Next slide. I hope that I have at least piqued your interest in matters of communication. We're always evolving and growing through the experiences and relationships we have. The impact of your communication is that important to the quality of your life. Burley Allen states that when listening effectively, you have a better chance of being in charge of a situation and influencing the outcome. I challenge you to keep growing in this area, to listen like we are listened to by our Lord Christ, attentively and patiently, listening much and speaking a lot less. Thank you.